He stole parts from me. I think it was on purpose. Good morning there, DBF family. So we are back on the Fab Rats 500 today, as you can see behind me. And on today's agenda, we are going to tackle the exhaust system and the cooling system and see if we can't get this all mocked up so I can pull the motor out, send the jug off to have machined, and get putting this thing back together. So let's get after it. As you can see, I got the exhaust kind of loosely put on it. It doesn't have the springs or anything to retain it to the cylinder head yet. I'm going to put those on here shortly. But first off, you can see with these aftermarket radiators, we've got a little bit of a clearance problem right here with the tank on this side and this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the springs on the expansion chamber, and we are going to trim the bottom corner of this tank right here, plate it, and close it back in and weld it up, and basically do the same thing here, except I'm going to come up and I'm going to rise this up just a little bit and plate that back in. So shouldn't affect cooling. I've done it before, works really well. And then after that, we will tackle the outlets for all the radiators to go from the 4-stroke style radiator cooling system to the 2-stroke 500 cooling system and hoses. But before we do that, I've actually got to trim this mount right here off, so that will let the pipe come closer to the frame just a little bit. So I'm going to pull the pipe back off and we're going to trim that up. Yeah, it's better. Stay. Okay, so I got the bracket cut off of the expansion chamber on Paul's bike, but this is the joys of building multiple projects all at the same time. So I'm not certain, but I think the other day when we were cleaning up and taking old parts home from working on Jed's KX500, if you guys haven't seen the build on that, highly recommend going and watching those videos because that thing is awesome. More to come on it. But anyways, back to my problem. See these springs right here that retain the pipe to the cylinder? I don't know where those are. I think they may have got thrown in the pile of used parts for Jed's KX500. And I don't have any extras. I can't find them anywhere. I've torn this garage apart high and low. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take the springs off of this bike right here, and you guys will see more of this bike coming up really quick in another couple videos. I actually sold this bike as a roller to Jace, and we're gonna build his motor that's over there in that crate and put in this frame and redo plastics, decals, all kinds of stuff on it because they're not quite right for our taste. So anyways, I'm gonna pull the springs off of this exhaust and go put them on Paul's. These radiators, they're just an eBay special. They were really cheap. I think I paid like 70 bucks for the set, or for the pair, I should say. I usually go with another supplier here locally in Utah, but they kind of dropped the ball on me and wouldn't ever return my phone call. So this is where we're at. So far, these are actually a really nice quality radiator. They look good. The welds are pretty good on it. Everything about them looks pretty awesome. So I figured for the price, we'll give these a shot, and if they don't work, we'll do something different as always. So anyways, I've got these things kind of marked out roughly. I'm gonna trim them up just a little bit and put them back on the bike and make double sure that our clearances are right, and we'll weld these things up. Cool. So I went ahead and did something, and I opened up the door. Man, look at that. sun's finally shining here in southern Utah. And these two are just soaking it up as fast as they can. I tell you what, this is really hard for me not to stop working on bikes today and go fire one of those up and go for a ride somewhere, because man, this sunshine is just, it's amazing. I'm loving it. But we're gonna work on this bike instead. So as you can see here, I went ahead and cut the old inlets off of the bottom of the tank, trimmed them out. I haven't capped them yet because I don't want to do that until I get the pipe permanently mounted. But I've run into another issue. Somewhere in my chaos of parts, I've got a new pipe stay for a Honda CR500. You think I could find it? Yeah, I'm having a hard time finding it, but anyhow, I'm gonna keep hunting. I might have to go rob one off of my 18 just to mock it up until I get one here next week. But after I get that done, we're gonna hook up the silencer on this thing, make sure all the plastics fit, and then we can get back to welding in the necks on the radiator and the drain for the water pump from the tank. I don't know if it's just because this is Paul's bike or what, but man, what does he say? He does it twice because he does it nice or something like that? I don't know, whatever. So I do have a question for you guys. As you can probably tell, I've got a different color of Dirt Bike Fab t-shirt on. I've had a few people hit me up about merchandise, you know, t-shirts, hats, stuff like that. If I was to have a bunch of them made, would you guys be interested in buying them? If you guys do, drop a comment down below and let me know. And if I get enough of them, heck, maybe I'll make a round of, I don't know, 100 or something, and we'll sell them. So let me know. Well, I can't find that stinking pipe bracket. So I'm gonna go ahead, rob that off of there for now, put it on there. But man, I sure do like this bike. So I robbed the pipe stay off of my 18500 and put it on here. And what I did is I just drilled and tapped the frame for now, just to hold it in place. Eventually I will actually pull that bracket back off and put a threaded nutsert in the frame, just like a factory pipe mount would be in the lowers. But after I did that, I just set the silencer mount up here just kind of loosely, seeing how it's gonna fit. And what I've decided is I'm gonna have to build a bracket from here to here and then weld one on right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the side panel on it, get the distance this way, and then I'll start making me a template for this mount. So as you can see, I'm using the old plastics that came on this chassis. Obviously, those are not gonna be the ones we use for final product of this bike. I'm just using them so, you know, I don't wanna mess up the new ones and get them scratched and all that. So we're gonna let Paul do that when he goes riding it, and we're gonna move on from there. So I went ahead and drew and cut up this template that I'll transfer to aluminum and cut out for the actual mount. So what I've done is this will utilize a factory 450 silencer mount and be able to use the factory 500 silencer mounts without having to modify the silencer or the factory 450 subframe. That way, when or if he ever bends this subframe, all he has to do is buy a factory 450 subframe or factory 500 silencer, and it all bolts on. So basically, this is a conversion plate. So I'm gonna transfer this to aluminum, we'll cut it out, and then mount it up. Well, silencer is all mounted, and I'm pretty happy about it. Looks pretty good from this angle and this angle and this angle, you know, whatever. But pull that off there, and I've got some, you know, some cleaning up to do. Like I'm gonna take and get a hand file, and I'll file the radius to match that bolt, and then you know, same thing down here and clean up that edge and clean up these edges just a little bit. I had to clearance it just a little bit because it was interfering with the bottom fender mount. And I mean, it probably would have been okay, but I would just rather spend the extra time and clearance that a little bit, and then we'll finish that off. But once we finish that off and blend it all in, that thing will look like a factory part, which that's kind of what I was after. So next step, I will actually build a mid-pipe bracket for the one that I cut off earlier, and I will end up utilizing again the factory pipe mount. Dogs are over there barking at something. Hey, you two, come here. They don't listen very well. Good morning. Well, we're back in the garage again today, and we're back on the FabRats 500. And yesterday we got the exhaust pretty much all mounted except for one bracket we're going to work on at some point. But on today's agenda, it's going to be cooling system and radiator. So let's get this thing wrapped up today. So late last night I came out and I made a pattern for this lower tank, and I just traced it out on a little bit of you know, cardboard, or you know, poster board is actually what it is. So I'm going to transfer that to aluminum, and we'll cut it out on the bandsaw and shape it and weld that in. We'll repeat that on the other side, and then we can go ahead and get all of the, you know, outlets and whatnot tacked into place for the cooling system for the hoses. So here's the first plate, and it's just kind of setting in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to tack weld each corner right here, and then I'll work my way down and tap this in and somewhat shape it so it, you know, basically lives inside of this tank for clearance wise. So I'm going to go ahead and get the TIG welder fired up and get these parts cleaned and weld this baby in. So while this radiator's still kind of hot from welding it, you can see I got the plate put in it. Got really good clearance. That looks way closer than it actually is on the camera. Come over here, there's a lot more room, but that's tons of room to get in between there. So anyways, while I got that there, I bolted the radiator back up, and then I came in and I scored a mark of where I want this inlet tube to ride this way. So I'm going to pull this back out. Ouch. While that radiator's still hot, I'm going to go ahead and burn this outlet in, do the same thing on the top one, and then this radiator will be done.
I got parts in my back seat that are rattling. I don't know what it is.
You got parts in your back seat? We got Honda oil, fork oil. You act like you've been building a bike the last couple months. Alright, so we ran up here to Jed's to get some parts and pieces that he threw in his box, that when he was cleaning up doing his, he stole parts from me. I think it was on purpose. It was on purpose. Anyhow, that's had to go get a few things, and then I'm gonna borrow one of the weld-in necks. I forgot to order an extra one, so that's what we're doing up there. But look at that view. Beautiful southern Utah. Hey Jed, why are you walking funny?
Yeah, my foot hurts.
Got the gout?
That's why I'm wearing tennis shoes. It's the only thing that I can get my feet in. I thought we was over it, but
poor guy, we built him a brand new bike, and the day we go to start it, he can't even hardly walk. He hasn't even ridden his bike yet.
bunch of BS.
So I got this side all put on there, and I think it's gonna work out pretty good. Had to do a little bit of bending right here for this lower hose, but we ran up to Jed's because I forgot to buy an extra one of these from CP Parts, and he happened to have an extra one from that project. So while he's cutting that piece out, I'm gonna throw this back up on the bike, figure out where I gotta punch a hole for that. So when we weld, we can weld it all together at once. And the trickery part.
What we got going on?
Building radiators, you know, because we buy new stuff and chop it up and make them work for our application, I guess. So I'm gonna go ahead and weld up the plate you build in, and then weld this happy little guy in schmear, and weld another one in there and another one in there. There's a lot going on this right-hand radiator. Bingo, just like that. So we're gonna fire up the Miller this time, not the Lincoln. Good catch on that, whoever that was in the comments. And see if we can melt a hole in this thing or if we can make it stick. I'm guessing maybe both. This way. Just eyeball it there for me, Dad. We're pretty close. Ish. Would it hurt if I bend it back this way just a skosh?
Nope.
That baby is hot, man. Almost like somebody's been melting it with electricity. I think. Looks good to me. Should I glue it? Glue it. Okay.
Run it.
Well, the cooling system is officially done on this thing. Radiator mods are complete. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. For hoses, I used kind of a combination of CR500 and the factory 450 four-stroke hoses. I think this is the only one that is a factory 450 hose. And this one, the rest are CR500 hoses. But it turned out pretty well. I'm happy with it. So on to the next step is we are going to do ignition. So first thing I'm going to do is mount the coil, and I believe it's going to live right here off of the head stay, kind of like so. So I'll get this tore apart and get some holes drilled in it and see if it'll fit right there. That's how I did my 18500, and it worked out really well. Did kind of a similar setup on Jed's KX500. It worked out really good. I kind of like doing that and keeping all of the ignition, you know, up high, hidden, kind of outside, out of mine, instead of having it up here on the neck where they are factory. So I'm gonna try to mount everything back under here like we've done on the last couple, just because it looks a lot cleaner. But anyhow, I'll get going on that. So while I'm standing here at the lathe, turning this part down for Paul's bike, I just gotta know, is there a specific kind of dirt bike build you guys would want to see on this channel? I mean, KTM, Husqvarna, Kawasaki, Honda, you know, Yamaha, whatever. I'm interested to know what kind of bike build or bike project you guys want to see. So go ahead, drop it down in the comments, and let's get some good suggestions on that, because at this point, you guys just want to see just CR500, KX500 stuff, we'll do that. But I want to see what you guys want me to build. So drop it down in the comments, and this is going to be fun. I'm interested to see what you guys want me to build. Or what about a budget bike build-off, where we buy cheap bikes and then we go ride them and put them to the test? What about something like that? Like I said, drop it down in the comments below. Let me know. Well, good news, bad news. I got those machined out, but the problem of it is I don't have long enough bolts. And where I live here in Kanab, they roll up the streets on Sundays, and there's nowhere open to get any metric bolts that are longer. So I'm gonna have to get those tomorrow, but you kind of get the idea of how that's gonna live right there. So it should work out pretty good. So when the hardware store opens up tomorrow morning, I'll run and grab some longer bolts and we'll get this thing bolted up. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. So first thing this morning, ran to the hardware store, got those longer bolts for the coil mount bracket on the FabRats 500. And Paul actually stopped by last night with a few parts, and let me show you what he brought me, because I mean, talk about good timing. This is incredible. Check this out. So what we have here is a MSV stator ignition setup for a CR500. So I actually run this same system on my 18500, and I'll never ride a CR500 or own a CR500 without this exact system again. So what makes this system nice is this system is actually adjustable for your ignition timing. So you can clock it one way, advance the ignition timing, or you can clock it back the other way and retard the ignition timing. So this, I told Paul, I was like, this is the best mod I've ever done to any CR500 I've ever ridden. And so what does he do? He goes and gets it ordered. But like I said, perfect timing because we're getting ready to mount the coil. This one's just a little bit different. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing thrown on the other bracket and we'll slap it on and make sure it's gonna fit right. And there you have it. Got the full ignition system from the coil to the motor. It's in place. It turned out really well. I do believe I'm gonna have to change out the spark plug to a shorter porcelain plug. I believe the part number is a NGK BR8ECM. Basically the same thing, just a shorter ignition plug or ignition porcelain. So just for clearance for the fuel tank on this conversion. I've had to do that on a couple of them. It's not a big deal, but that turned out really well. Just like everything else, you know, it's once we tear it apart and go back for a final assembly, we'll redefine a little bit and do a little fit and finish on it, and the thing will look awesome. I set the tank up on it, and yep, just like I suspected, it does not clear the spark plug with the boot on it. It actually hits the bottom of the tank. So there's a couple of remedies to this. Like I said, I can put a shorter spark plug in the motor, which helps a ton. But the other thing what we have to do on these 450 conversions is the fuel outlet spout. It goes forward and it actually hits the top of the spark plug boot. So simple fix, flip this around, make the line come out the back. And another thing you can do is actually heat this tank a little bit and mold the tank back in towards itself and just leave a little teeny bit of clearance for all of the fuel hoses and everything like that. And it only, I mean, it doesn't take that much fuel capacity away. Probably not enough that you're gonna miss it, but I mean, if you're doing a lot of desert riding, for sure, but where he's just doing hobby riding and trail riding and, you know, just messing around with this thing, he'll have plenty of fuel in it, especially with the MSV ignition. That thing right there, for some reason, makes these bikes way more fuel efficient. All right, so what I'm gonna use to heat this tank up to mold it is this Wagner, you know, heat gun. And this thing gets pretty hot. I can't remember how hot it gets, but it gets, you know, 500 or 600 degrees. The trick to doing this is heat the area around the mounting surface, because you don't want to distort this area here, or you have a chance of losing the seal to the fuel outlet. So I'm going to heat around here just a little bit and essentially just mold this piece down inside of the heated area. So I'm going to heat this up with the air gun and take something heavy like this hammer or something and just push on this edge right here and roll itself in on this outer area here. And the reason I'm using this is because it's heavy, it's got some weight, and you're just going to do little bits of pressure at a time with a little bit of heat at a time. You don't want to go too fast and melt the tank. You just want to make it pliable with heat and just basically press it down into itself. Just going to slowly start to heat this entire tank. Okay, if you look up in there, you can see between the two hoses, the outlet is got tons of clearance for the fuel, tons of clearance for the, you know, the radiator hoses. I mean, that fit really well. Oops, not my flashlight, sorry about that. Yeah, it's got really good clearance now, so now we can move on to finishing this thing up. All right, so I'm back on Paul's bike, and I am actually right in the middle of finishing up the mid expansion chamber bracket. So I went ahead, cut out some thin sheet metal stainless steel, because that way it won't rust over time. And the way it's gonna work is basically, this is gonna go into here on top of the pipe. And then from there, I am over on the lathe creating a spacer with a rubber bushing inside of it as an isolator. So when it vibrates, it doesn't break any of the brackets or anything like that. So over here, I started turning this down, already got the drill drilled in it. So I'm gonna turn this down to fit inside of this rubber piece. So that'll go onto there, and this will give me the actual spacing I need between the frame and the bracket. Well, there you have it. All I gotta do now is come in and tack weld this bracket to the expansion chamber on both sides, and then I'll tear it apart. You can see back in there, I'll tear it apart and TIG weld it all together on the bench. And this thing, it's built. It's 100% mocked up. So I guess the next step, there's the dogs. They're seeing what's going on. So the next step, tear this thing down, pull the motor apart, and ship the cylinder off, and what other parts we ever got to do to build the motor, and it's done. It's all mocked up. I'm pretty dang pleased with how this thing's turned out. This will be a fun bike for Paul. I think he's really gonna enjoy it. I've had a blast building it, but I'm a CR500 guy. What can I say? It's what I do. I like them. Well, there you have it. The old FabRats 500 is complete. I am super happy with how this thing went together. This is gonna be an awesome bike for Paul. But next time you see this thing, we'll tear this thing all apart, pull the motor apart, see what we got to do there to make it happy and run just perfect for Paul. Got a pretty good idea of what we're going to do there. And after that, we'll start cleaning parts. Man, I got a lot of parts to clean on it. I mean, a lot of parts to clean to go back together. And then after that, we'll do final assembly on this thing. And I can't wait to share some of the parts that are going to go on this thing on this bike of Paul's. These parts that I'm getting for this thing they're next level. It's gonna be awesome. This bike's gonna be sweet. So that being said, I appreciate all you guys watching and all your support, and just know that you guys are the best, and we'll catch you on the next one.